Welcome, everyone, to Season 2, Episode 1 of Ladies' #1 Detective Agency, Clearing the Paranormal. I am your host, Aimée Clark, and today I am joined by my co-host, Bill Johnston and Janet Graham. Today is January 21st, 2025. Wow, time sure has flown. Bill and Janet, welcome. How are you both doing today?
Good. Nice to be here. And hello to everybody. And I'm hoping for warmer weather.
Yes. Janet, welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to this. This is an exciting one. I was so looking forward to doing this podcast. And I have to say, I have talked to people about this certain book that I just read, and I've got everybody so interested. They're going nuts. They can't wait to buy it.
Oh, thank you, Janet.
So it's just awesome.
We're very excited about today's episode, as Janet said, as we have the fabulous DeeAnne Riendeau. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Riendeau.
Okay, joining us. DeeAnne is a near-death experiencer, author of The Ark, and founder of Rose Hope Incorporated. Before we have DeeAnne join us, maybe for our new listeners, it would be nice to have both you and Janet, Bill, give us a brief bio, just or an overview on who you are, how the metaphysical and paranormal world has been a part of your life.
Well, I'm a Holy Fire and Earth Light Energies Reiki Master. I've had experienced negative entities in both of the previous homes that I've owned and participated in clearing of both those. And in the last 5 years, I've been helping Aimée clearing homes and also people of negative energies and entities. And I get to work with some very interesting people and highly energetic people with special traits and skills.
Yeah.
Out of the norm, I guess you would say.
Yes. And he also neglected to add that he does a lot of distant work with healing work with me, and he picks up a lot of past life information when he's working on his clients, and we've worked on some pretty big clearings and had some interesting experiences with that. Thank you, Bill. Janet?
Hi. I'm Janet Graham. I have been doing readings most of my life, seeing things and hearing things and feeling things. And I had a near-death experience in my 30s. I believe I was 33 at the time, and remember that quite clearly, and had such wonderful feelings coming back from that. I met Aimée about 4 years ago, and we've been doing work together now for about 4 years. So, and we're still having fun doing it.
Yes.
I'm also do Reiki. I'm a Reiki master, and I love talking to people and getting to know them and understanding them and telling them what I see. And I get to tell them where to go. It's so much fun.
Whether they want to hear it or not. Thank you, Janet. And now for our special guest, DeeAnne. Welcome to our podcast, DeeAnne.
Oh, thank you so much. I just feel so welcomed in this beautiful sacred space that you've created to share stories with the world. And, I want to start by saying, first and foremost, I'm a child of divine. I'm an extension of the divine. And the work that I do is I help people who are in the process of remembering who they are to tune into their sacred gifts and their magic. So I have been doing this work, I would say actually most of my life. I'm going to share my story in a little bit, but I really went on that deeper discovery of who I was and remembering who I was. I spent most of my life hiding, stuffing away the things that I knew, but the rest of the world didn't know, kind of thing. And And so now I get to be the most authentic, true version of myself. And my dream is to allow and give permission and to support those people who are ready to step into that path for themselves as well. And so I do a whole bunch of things. I'm a professional speaker. I've spoken all over the world, including Harvard, on television, and all those fun things. But my heart really belongs in the space of facilitation and holding sacred space for people as they go through their journey.
Well, we're very grateful that you decided to join us today. We've been really looking forward to this since we got to chat before Christmas. And I know you shared a little bit about yourself now, but if you wanted to maybe go in depth and share us a little bit more about yourself, as much or as little as you wish to share.
Well, I love talking about my near-death experiences and my journey into that remembrance because I think it's so potent. And I think most of us go through life and, we expect some big epiphany experience, for us to deepen this relationship with who we are. And I want to first tell people, you don't need to self-induce a near-death experience in order to have an epiphany, okay? You can really consciously choose the path. And so I just want to share that before I get started. So I was 5 years old when I died the first time. I was eating one of those round Jawbreaker candies. Do you guys remember those
Oh,
Jawbreaker?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
And I was a bit of a sugar, addict, probably still am. But as a child, I was always eating candy, and here I am sucking on this Jawbreaker. And my dad said to me, "Go sit down before you choke." So I went to go sit down, and I took a breath. And I got that Jawbreaker lodged in my throat. I could not breathe. I could not make a sound. And my dad came running over. He wrapped his arms around me and he started doing the Heimlich maneuver. And I remember in my 5-year-old mind thinking my head was going to pop off. That's what I thought was about to happen, that my head was going to pop off. And before I knew it, I was gone. I was no longer in my body. In fact, I was hovering above my body, floating above, watching my lifeless body below. My dad had guided me to the floor and he had started to do compressions and, do whatever he could to get the object out. And I remember my mom running to the phone. I could see my mom so clearly from my perspective, running to the phone. I saw my older sister peeking around the corner to see what was going on, but I didn't feel the chaos. I felt like I was held in the arms of God or divine or creator or whatever you call that. And so I was held in unconditional love. And my dad did something you're not supposed to do. He used his thumb, stuck it in my throat, pushed against my throat enough that he could just barely get that Jawbreaker out, and he got me breathing again.
Wow.
So my dad gave me life not once but twice.
Mhm.
And after that experience, all of my blood vessels had broken in my face. My whole face was black and blue. But eventually that went away. But some of the energetic things started to really show up. My dreams became very lucid. I started to have precognition. I would know things before they would happen. I'll never forget it. One morning I had a dream that, a neighbor's mom had died. And so I went over to my mom and I said, "Mom, so-and-so died last night." And her jaw almost hit the floor because she had just got off the phone learning the news of that death. And so these things started to happen. But because I was raised in this Catholic home, a lot of the things that I was experiencing were very taboo. So my mom taught me how to pray, which I'm so grateful for because that's become such an ally and tool for me. But what happened was I felt like those were things that I shouldn't be seeing and sharing. I felt like, I was having these really crazy dreams and that was wrong. So I hid away those parts of myself. I could tell it made people feel uncomfortable. So I just hid it inside, Heaven forbid we make anyone feel uncomfortable. And after that near death, I felt like I had to now prove my worth, that this second chance that I had, that I better make it worth it. I better prove to God that God made the right choice in keeping me here. And so I became an overachiever people pleaser. And so by the time I wasn't even I was in grade 4 and I started the Kids for Saving Earth Club. I thought that was I had to now carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. God chose me to come back, in my little mind. That's how I felt and thought. And so, I excelled in school. I excelled in my career. In fact, my first career was in EMS. I was an EMT and firefighter. So here I was, 18 years old, still a little kid myself. And
Yeah.
I was dealing with things that most people never have to deal with in their life. But something started to happen in that time. And spirits started to come home with me. And so I had this one call. It was a DOA, which means dead on arrival. So we knew that the person was already deceased, but I had to go and I had to move the body, take pictures with the RCMP and all of that stuff. And so I spent a lot of time with this woman's body. And so when I got home from that shift, I could still feel her presence, but I didn't understand it because I had locked away everything, right? And I didn't understand this creepy, eerie feeling that someone was with me. I remember having a dozen showers that night because I thought that was the only way I would get rid of
You're
that.
gonna cleanse yourself.
Yeah, that was the only thing I knew to do. I didn't understand. And part of me thought I was going crazy. I thought I'm losing my mind. Like this isn't real stuff. Again, I had now a science background. So now I have this training in science, right? Like you can't prove that this entity or this spirit's there, So again, I'm going through this whole process in my head thinking, I think I have PTSD. Like I don't think I can stay in this career. I did end up leaving that career and I ended up teaching in health sciences. So I loved teaching. I was a very young teacher, but I was very passionate about what I did. And I excelled in that space. But even though I was starting to have success with my career and figuring that out, I went through what I call a quarter life crisis in my mid 20s. And in that time, I was feeling really lost. Like I was in between, wanting to still be a kid, but needing to grow up and be an adult and figuring life out. And I did a lot of the I'll be happy when game. You know that game? I'll be happy when I do these things, when this bill is paid, when whatever. And I was still stuck in this kind of trap of misery. And so I was blessed with yet another near-death experience. Now, this near-death, very different than the first. Um, in fact, I was recovering from surgery. I know a lot of people have a near-death while they're in surgery. Mine happened after. We think it was an idiosyncrasy to some of the medication I was on, and my blood pressure tanked, and there I went. But as I was hobbling on crutches, it was a knee surgery that I had, and I'm hobbling on crutches. It's the day after my surgery, so I'm still in rough shape on all these all these meds and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, the room goes black. It's gone. And before I know it, I am suspended in what I can only describe as heaven. I have the most euphoric feeling. I'm floating in space and time. And it feels even more incredible than what I remember from when I was 5. This time, it's so much more potent for me. The euphoria I felt, the ecstasy I felt, I can't even put into words because it was so blissful. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm staying here, in which I then heard a response, no, sorry, you have work to do. Because what happened as I was floating in that ether, if you will, these beautiful giant orbs of light of the brightest colors surrounded me. And I knew in my heart they were angels. I had a knowing they were angels. And as all of these colors surrounded me, and I continued to feel this vibration of unconditional love and grace, like all the things that we, crave, right? Just sitting there, I wanted to stay. I did. I wanted to, nothing else mattered in that moment. This was so beautiful and so potent. I wanted to stay. And like I said, they said, you have work to do. Now, this wasn't words they spoke. I just understood them in my mind, right? And so I woke up with my brother-in-law staring at me, looking quite panicked, actually, and thankfully he had caught me when I went unresponsive. Excuse me. And so he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and I don't know how to put into words what just happened. So I get back in my bed and get comfortable. And as I'm processing this, it's like, how can I tell people about this? They're going to think I'm crazy. So I'm thinking, I can never share this with anybody because this isn't normal. And, there's something wrong with me. All of these thoughts, these self-critical thoughts. And so the next few days, I'm still carrying this story, this magical experience that I had, and it is on my heart and it needs to come out. I need to share it with somebody. So a girlfriend comes over. I'm now 3 days into my recovery. So I'm still, hobbling around in crutches and what have you, healing. And so this girlfriend comes over and I'm telling her my story because I feel safe with her. And so I'm telling her this story and these angels, and all of this love and all these things. And the most beautiful thing happened. My brother-in-law, who was the one that caught me when I fainted, was eavesdropping on our conversation. And I'm so glad he was eavesdropping that day.
Mhm.
He lived with me at the time. And so he heard me telling the story. So he comes running into the kitchen, slams his hand on the counter. He says, I knew it. I felt the angels too.
No way.
Mhm.
So
Cool.
so here's his perspective now. So he said, I went white as a ghost and I started to fall and he was able to catch me. He said, once I was on the ground, he couldn't find a pulse. He didn't think I was breathing. He started to panic. He's like, oh my God, she's going to die. And it's going to be my fault. You know, his panic is going on.
Yeah.
So now he's looking for the phone to call 911, right? Can't find the phone because, you know, we leave our phone in all sorts of places nowadays. Can't find the phone. And so as he's panicking, looking for the phone, he feels these angels come in. He said he can only describe it as a feeling. It was like a sense of peace all of a sudden came. And he heard the words, she's going to be fine, just wait.
Wow, that's
So,
powerful.
isn't it? Like I still get the chills. I still get goosebumps when I speak about it because it was like such a potent moment for me of validation, you
Yeah.
know? And I needed that validation at that time because I was doubting what I was seeing and thinking and experiencing. And so he brought such a gift in a way, right? And so he said once he came back to me, he said I opened my eyes with a smile on my face. So
Wow.
so it was so powerful to me, such a lesson in telling our vulnerable stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Yes.
more I share, the more vulnerable the story is, the more powerful it becomes.
Yes.
And when we share our vulnerable stories, we really give permission for others to do the same.
Well, and
And
I
so,
think, yeah, and I think part of your, sorry to interrupt, but part of what you were describing when you were younger and the experiences that you were having, even people who haven't had a near-death experience, who grow up with these abilities of precog, or they see, um, you know, uh, beings that aren't there. I'll just say it
sure.
that way. So non-physical beings, um, or have, can read people at quite a young age. Usually it's by 8, they shut it all down because they think it's normal until everybody else starts treating them like they're weird. It's not normal. And you start to learn to close it down, shut up about it. So
I
yeah,
mean,
having
I
that pre-share, allows people to share their story about how that happened or open those memories.
Yes, I mean, I'm so glad that you shared that because that was my challenge with much of my life. Like I was so afraid to share the things I was seeing and feeling and sensing because I felt like that was so abnormal and I felt like I would be discarded or I'd be exiled, I'd be judged and persecuted. And actually, this happens for a lot of healers and light workers out
Mhm.
there where they're so afraid to step into their true power
Yeah.
because there's been so many lifetimes in their past that have, where they have been persecuted, in fact, killed
Killed
many times,
many.
right? I know that's been my story. I've been killed many,
Yes.
many times for doing this type of work. So no wonder we hide it. No wonder we feel afraid to express it into the world. But again, as we come to this understanding, this knowing that as we share it, it is medicine for us and it's medicine for the world. And that's how I look at the storytelling as medicine. And that's allowed me to step on stages and share some of the most crazy, vulnerable stories possible, right?
Mhm.
So that near death, a lot of people think they're like, oh, after that second near death, then you had life figured out. It was not that way for me. In fact, in fact, I actually struggled even more because I just wanted to go back to heaven. So
Mhm.
then I started to seek out heaven. Guess where I started looking? I started looking out there and I started looking out there and looking out there, looking for my career. Oh, when I have my children, then I'll find heaven. When I have the love of my life, then I'll have heaven. When I make $1 million, then I'll have heaven. So I had this very extrinsic perception. And so as I was seeking heaven outside of myself, I was feeling more and more miserable because I wasn't finding it. And even though I had this beautiful life, I was feeling so miserable and so disconnected. And so I actually felt like I had let God down now. Like, I'm really messing this up. Like, how come I can't figure this out? I was struggling so much. In fact, I struggled so much, I went into such a deep depression. And that was coupled with some postpartum. My son was 6 months old. And I was in a state. This is now about 5 years after that second near death. So maybe I might just take time to learn these things. Maybe I'm a slow learner. I don't know. But it took me a while because I still was caught up in this world that I had been told was the right way to live. And so as I'm going through that process, the I'll be happy when game, and feeling more miserable, and then feeling guilty and shameful that I couldn't be happy when I had everything anyone could possibly want, right? And
Yeah.
so that depression sunk me so deep. I came into such a deep place of emotional pain. I had decided that I was going to take my life.
Wow.
So here I am laying in bed. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, and I'm feeling that I'm now a burden to them, that I'm now causing more harm than I am good. And I'm in such a place of deep despair. And so I started to pray because I was starting to plan out, how am I going to do this so that there's not some traumatic effect after? Like, where can I go? How can I do this to make it clean and easy? I'm starting to plan. And as I'm laying in bed with tears in my eyes, working out how I'm going to take my life, I decided to say one last prayer. And I said, God, you need to show me another path if I'm supposed to be on it, because this is the only path that I see for myself right now. And something so beautiful happened in that moment. God answered, and God showed me what I needed to do. And He showed me a path of creating a holistic healthcare system. Now, I had also struggled with my health my whole life, and I had a background in healthcare. And so I even had a health management degree by that time as well. So I had all the tools and all the experiences, and it made perfect sense.
Mhm.
So as I cried myself to sleep that night with gratitude, knowing that there was another path, I woke up the next morning and I started that new path.
Good.
And I created this holistic healthcare system, the first of its kind. And I spent 7 years pouring my heart and soul into that. That business gave me life. It really, really did. But as that 7 years passed, I had neglected myself, my children even. I poured everything that I knew into that. It kept me alive, but it now had become almost a hostage keeper, because now I wasn't living the life that I needed to be living. But in that experience, I met spiritual guides. I learned about the Akashic records. So I started to come into this discovery, and what it showed me was the path was never out there. Finding heaven, can't find it out there.
It's inside you.
Be inside. And
Yes.
now it seems so obvious to me. Like,
Mhm.
now it's like, duh. But I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know I had to build a relationship with myself. And so as I started building this relationship with myself, and I started to bring and remember all of those things that I had stored away so deeply inside of me, it's like the light bulbs just kept firing off.
Yeah.
But eventually I got to another fork in the road, and Spirit said, are you going to follow your path to guide people spiritually and remember who they are? Or are you going to keep yourself busy and distracted, trying to manage thousands of people? And
Mhm.
I very clearly what my answer was. I knew that that was the moment that I was really stepping into my most divine path.
Right.
And so rather than sell that company, I had a contest, Willy Wonka style. There was no golden ticket, but I held a contest and I gifted that company.
Wow.
And people thought I was bonkers. I had people calling me to offer me money, but that business gave me life. You
You're
see?
right.
And so I felt like I owed it in a way. And
So,
so,
sorry to interrupt, but I just had a couple of questions because I don't want to forget before we get any further, just
Mhm.
because of some comments you made. But so what year were you around what time, uh, like what year was it when all of this stuff was happening?
So,
have a
okay.
reason for asking the question. So
No, that's okay. My second near death, I was 26. So that would take me, I think it was 2000. I have to do some math here. How old am I? So it was just under 20 years ago. So it was in the
so
early
then
two.
in your company, how long like
And then my company I started in 2000 and 13, and
right?
then that went until 2020. So it was just before COVID.
COVID hit.
Yeah,
Had to get rid of it before COVID hit. It's like the universe had come in, but also what we also forget is what society has set us up to believe and understand and everything else. So even though we're struggling with our own, who am I? Why am I here? We're also faced with this information, false information, a lot of it, as to, why, who we are supposed to be in society that
Yes.
subconsciously is filtering in through there. So you can't be too hard on yourself.
Oh, thank you for that, Grace. Yes, I extend myself so much love and grace for that because you're right. I thought success looked like this. Do you know what I mean? Over here.
But we were told that's what it looked like.
Right? Yeah, like you get a successful job, you work really hard, you pay your bills, you buy a house, you do all the things, right? So I was very stuck in that. And so I had to reconcile
You're right.
what my spirit was calling me versus what I thought this world was really about. And so that's why it took me a little bit of time, right? To really figure that out and
Well,
reconcile.
then since 2002, because of everything that happened with COVID and more and more information, people are sitting at home watching TV and trying to figure out what's going on in life and researching more than they ever have. And now you even see it in movies and day-to-day conversation. This has become more commonplace in general knowledge, which is making it so much easier for the
Oh.
path forward, right?
It really is. We are in a massive awakening, as you
Mhm.
all know. And so people are starting to remember. And so they're seeking out communities and groups like ours that really are saying, hey, we're here. We're not here to judge. We're here to welcome you with open, loving arms. We're here to help you. And I think that there's such potency in that in itself. And we're seeing more and more of that, right? As people are coming into this awakening. My awakening was a bit of a dark night of the soul, but again, reminding people you don't even have to go through a dark night of the soul or a near death or have some sort of like major trauma event to
Mhm.
choose the path inward. We can actually just choose it.
Choose. So at what point did you become aware that other people had had near-death experiences, and did you reach out to any of those people or go down that path at all?
Yeah, it was so profound to me because I actually didn't feel like I had much of a story. Like I didn't, it's so funny to me because in my mind, it's like, who wants to hear my story? Like it's not that important or special, right? I think a lot of people feel that way about their own experiences. And I remember I was actually at like a mind, body, spirit expo, and I came around a corner and I see this woman with these books, and it's called Heaven Time, and her name was Lori. And I met this woman, and she was such a ball of light. And that was one of the first books I read about someone's near death experience. So she
Ah,
wrote about her own near death in that. And that actually triggered something inside me because then I was like, oh, like my story does matter and it is important. And so then I, of course, went down the rabbit hole of watching movies of after death and all the documentaries and all those sorts of things because I found it so fascinating. And I wanted to understand if other people had similar experiences to
mhm.
mine. I wanted to know what their stories were. And it was extra evidence and validation for me as I went on that process. And, I just find it so fascinating that we really there's so much more here than
Mhm.
we think there is, right?
Absolutely.
It reminds me, there's this little story that made its rounds on social media, but it's these two little twin babies inside their mom's belly. And one of the babies goes, man, it's so great in here. Like, I never want to leave. Like, when this is over, there's nothing after this. It's going to be nothing. Like, I don't want it to end. And the other baby says, well, what if there is something more? And we know that those babies get birthed into this whole other world. And what if we're in a womb here? What if this is just our next womb and we get to actually be rebirthed into something completely new and experience life after life after life? And I thought that that was a really potent way of thinking about this experience here while we're here, because we feel like it's so finite. And although, yes, in the three-dimensional sense it is, but there's so much more to it. I like to think that I'm in this womb right now, and when it's my time, I'll be birthed into the next one and the next one and the next one. And I thought that that was such a beautiful way of looking at the world, because death for me, I've had a big relationship with death. In fact, this last summer I had pneumonia, and that pneumonia was the grief that I had stored away for, over 20 years. When I was in high school, I had about 12 deaths happen in about a year and a half, grandparents, cousins, friends, name it. And then I had another big string of deaths recently. And so I had all this grief that I had stored away. And I really
And it does
learned.
get stored in the lungs. Like that's what we teach in Reiki. The
Yes.
lungs hold grief.
Uh-huh. So I suffered with that pneumonia. I was hospitalized a couple times. I was really sick until I started looking at my grief. And once I started to befriend that grief and hold space for that grief instead of hiding it and resisting it, things started to let go.
And change.
And change, right? I started to heal. And although I cried for 40 days, legitimately, it was 40 days of
Wow.
bawling every day. I just let myself. And I think it's really easy in this world. We just want to reject those feelings, those not so nice feelings, right? We have a tendency of like, oh no, I don't want to be angry, and I don't want to, feel that way. And so we push them away and we distract ourselves or do whatever. But really what those energies are, they're like children too. They just want our love and attention. And not to the point where I'm hyper fixating on it, but actually to the place where I'm like, I held my grief lovingly in my hands and I said, hi, grief. And I'm bawling by this, of course, as I'm holding my hands, looking at the grief, I'm bawling my eyes out. And I'm saying, I see you and I'm sad that you're here, but I know you're teaching me something. What is it? What do I need to know? What do I need to understand? And so the learning and the that lessons that poured in as a result of that befriending actually shifted that grief. It helped me to alchemize the grief, because that grief just wants to be seen and heard. And as soon as I say, I see you, I hear you, that grief already starts to lighten up and says, oh, thank goodness she gets it. She knows why I'm here. And so it's just such a beautiful way of us leaning in, letting ourselves feel the emotion, recognizing there's value in those emotions too, rather than pushing them away. Because I spend my whole life doing that.
Well, you still have to process them. So and it's important, because if you don't, I mean, we experience it all the time when we're working on people. That's what we end up with all these energetic blocks and inability to move forward until those are cleared. So.
Yeah. And a lot of us don't even realize we do that, So, that's just an invitation for your audience to lean into, okay, can I love these denser parts, or the perceived denser parts of what I'm feeling? And that in itself will help us to alchemize that energy in a beautiful way.
Well,
Well,
thank you. And do you want to?
just on that note, anybody that's went through past life regression, hypnotherapy, I mean, you don't have a choice when you're in that state. You're crying or you're laughing or wherever you happen to be at that time, right? So there's no more holding it back. It's just already.
Yes.
I'd like to touch on a note. It's your comment about your second near-death experience. And I've never heard it said before, but your brother-in-law. I've never heard anybody tell a story and somebody outside of that experience experienced it as well. Like, you did some research, right? Have you ever heard anybody else tell that
Yes.
story?
Yes, so there are now documented experiences of bystanders also having some sort of spiritual experience when the person was having their near death.
That's really
Isn't it?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Very
And
cool.
confirmation,
and proof,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yes, now that there's more and more of those stories popping up where they were near someone who experienced a near death and they had some sort of vision, some sort of download, some sort of channeling that happened for them in that experience. So
But
That
yeah,
it's
it
has
is.
to be life changing for that person as well.
yeah. Well, it must be so
Yeah,
they were able to hear that and go, oh my God, thank God I'm not crazy. That actually happened. So it was
right.
actually not just you that benefit from it, but it was actually your brother-in-law because he probably was experiencing all this stuff and didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And he was able.
You're right. Yeah. And him and I still have I just saw him today actually, and him and I have a great bond. You
Mhm.
know, we've shared in that sacred bond, which is so fantastic. And yeah, so yeah, it was such a blessing. It really, really was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing too is like when you're talking about h- who to talk to, who you can talk to. The thing that comes back to you too is people when you start to even tell them a little bit about it, they go, "Oh, you're nuts, you're crazy," you just maybe you should get checked out by the doctor.
Yeah.
Like I've heard all the negative parts of it
Right.
too
The
and was
voices.
attacked that way. So, you hold it back until you feel in like you're in a safe space. But when you go back and you feel that, you go back in your head and your heart and you feel that connection again. It's like, it's so beautiful that you don't even want to be here. You just want to be there with them.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be on that other side.
Think about what
Yeah.
happened when my mom passed in March and what I experienced
Yeah.
when, because I could experience everything that was happening around her. I knew beings were coming in to, and then when I tried to talk to my dad and my brother about it, I got, just dismissed like you wouldn't believe. And I just said, I just can't wait till you pass on and have to come back and apologize to me.
It's,
So
you know,
it's just, you
it's
know,
hard for people to understand if they've never allowed themselves to tune in,
yeah.
right?
Right.
You know, so many of us are so conditioned and programmed that
Mhm.
we can't see beyond that.
Well,
Yeah.
we
And
lose it.
We lose
Excuse
it
me.
when we, yeah.
But we lose it
Mhm.
when we're children because we're told, oh, it's all in your head or it's a nightmare. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I was a very small child, and yeah, I would have nightmares, but I would also see things, and I'd cry out, and my mom would come upstairs and go, "Oh, you're just having a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's your imagination." And I'm like, "No, but I'm seeing faces, right?" Well, now when I think about it, so then over the years you go, "Oh yeah, well that's all it was." Right? But then, as we learn, no, they weren't. I was actually seeing. Now, I don't think uh, there was anything evil, but I mean, I probably did see spirits in the house. And then my mom told me at one point that she remembers one of us kids were upstairs. We lived in an old two-story house, was upstairs crying in the crib, and she went up to soothe us, and there was an old lady standing there. Whichever baby it was had stopped crying.
Mhm.
Right.
Oh, that just gives me like good feelings.
But people don't talk about it.
No.
no, they don't because they think it's weird. They think they need to have some explanation for everything, right?
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of a beautiful story. First, I'm gonna should say this because you talked about imagination. Our divine imagination is actually a gateway to deeper intuition.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. You know, we squash that imagination. And there is the imagination of our ego mind, which is the one that tells us the negative stories, that tells us all the lies and all the limits that we have. But then we've got our divine imagination. That's our channel to divine. That's our intuition. That's our ability to tap in. Everything is energy. And we know that. We know vibration and frequency. Now it's science is proving that, right? And so we understand that now. But I think for many people, they still desire to have this evidence base, like, oh, I need evidence for this. But I want to share this story because it actually was so potent for me. I was out camping. This is a number of years back. I am doing spiritual work though already, so I'm tuned in. And I get up early in the morning before anybody else is up, and I'm going for a little walk. And as I get out of the trailer, I look around and there are feathers everywhere, white feathers everywhere.
Cool.
And right away, I just knew the angels had had a party, and I could feel the goosebumps. I could feel the presence of the angels still. And I remember just being in such a beautiful awe state. And I said, thank you so much. I'm so glad you guys are having celebration. And I felt that energy. And then as I continue to walk, I realized that it's not feathers at all. It's actually some sort of pollen that had just got damp in the dew and then it dried like feathers, but it wasn't feathers at all.
Mhm.
So as I realized that there was this logical explanation, I said, okay, angels, why would you let me think it's you if there's a logical explanation? And they said, you're missing the point. You
Mhm.
felt us, didn't you?
Mhm.
Felt us, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did feel you. And they said that no matter what, you can always find some sort of logical reasoning to explain it away. They said that's not the point. The point is that you felt a connection, that something sparked inside of you. You know, the same thing goes for when we've lost loved ones. You know, I have one of my soulmates passed away a few years ago, and he leaves me dimes in the most random places.
That's the typical thing to
Right.
me.
Dimes are very common, of
Yeah.
course.
Mhm.
But you know, in weird places where they're not supposed to be. Of course, I could create some explanation of like, oh, well, that got stuck on someone's shoe and it, you know, ended up there. Like whatever, but that's not the point. And so our job is to start opening ourselves up to what actually is possible without needing some sort of logical reasoning or explanation as to why, but to rather lean in to that experience, that feeling, that sensation, the awe and the wonder that so many of us have lost. We're being asked to invoke our awe and wonder again.
Yes, and that's a great segue into the next question
So,
topic we were gonna go
DeeAnne, you
into.
had mentioned Akashic records.
Yes.
So I understand you have a really good understanding. Could you maybe explain that to
I'd love to.
us?
So, thank you for asking about it because I love the Akashic Records. First of all, the Akashic Records is your soul's library or God's library, if you will. And so it is a space of everything that is, was, and ever shall be. If you can imagine, there's a recorded imprint energetically of everything, of everything. Okay. And so we can tune into that vibration. So we can access it through deepening our level of consciousness. And so it is a space of consciousness that we enter into. If we break down the word Akash, and by the way, the pronunciation is actually Akasha, is actually the original pronunciation, but the word Akash means primordial substance or beginning of time. And so the idea is that anything since we left source, we can understand, we can document, we can retrieve information. So when I started doing the holistic healthcare system, I was having these practitioners come and someone came and said, "Oh, the Akashic records." And I thought, "What is that?" You know, like I don't get it. And they explained it to me and I thought, I still don't get it. Like it still seems a little bit, I'm not sure. So I decided to take the course as a skeptic because I thought if I'm going to refer people to these people, I better make sure it's legit. So of course, in my science mind, I'm going in there. My goodness to gracious, I was blown away. Everything that I had buried away came bubbling to the surface. I knew things that I didn't know I knew, that I shouldn't know, right? And so it was so profound for me. I went in there as a skeptic. I left there as a true believer, and I've never looked back. So I specialize in the Akashic records. I do advanced research. I teach practitioners how to use the Akashic records so that they can make their lives and their businesses better. Really knowing the Akashic records, I mean, you can open the Akashic records of pets, plants, houses. And so when I'm doing house clearings, because I also will clear homes with ghosts, I open the Akashic records and I just get so much more information out of it. And so we do use our intuition in the Akashic records, but the theory is that everything's amplified in that space. So I could sit here and do an intuitive reading or a healing session with you, but if we go into the records, well, that just cranks it up a notch. So some people will call the experience even a soul massage, whatever that might mean for you. And I think that's a beautiful way of looking at that experience in that process. So I love this work. And, what I find is most people who lean in, they realize that they've already been tuning in
Mhm.
because everyone can do it. I mean, Bill, Aimée, Janet, you guys are all tuned in. You're
Mhm.
already slipping into the Akash, but maybe you just don't know it. What's beautiful about the Akash is that it's a sacred container. So again, I could just open things up and do a reading, but if I'm not really clear on my intentions, I could get some distorted information or riffraff, I call it, coming in. Whereas with the Akash, we open it up with a prayer and we close it with a prayer. You can also open it with a meditation and close it with a meditation. But nonetheless, we're creating a sacred container of divinity. And so we get to go into that sacred space. And from there, we, of course, pull and retrieve information of all sorts.
Very interesting.
Thank you. Janet.
Yes, I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay. Well, you've had some experience with the Akashic Records as well. I don't know if you want to touch on that or if you wanted to talk about the
The book.
next topic.
The next topic. Well, my experience was going there and being handed a key and being outside of these big wrought iron gates, and an angel standing there and giving me the key. So I opened the lock and went into this great big beautiful building that looked like it was all marble, and the ceiling was so high. It was beautiful. And then going in and I remember walking, and I remember a woman meeting me there and talking to me. And uh, she said, the records, you have the key now. You're open to all these records.
Love it. Wow.
So it's like, and I remember looking around and just feeling so wonderful.
Mm. I love that. I love that you got to experience that. To me, going into the Akash is like tuning into heaven. It's
Yeah.
the closest that I've found to tuning into heaven in this three-dimensional world. And so it's been very profound. Now, everyone will have a different experience. Some people see a massive library. I also see the marble, by the way, in the beautiful building. I also get that. Um, Sometimes it'll just be a void, right? It'll just be white space or black space. Sometimes we'll be brought into a beautiful forest, every time for me now, it's different. When I first started, it was pretty much the same, but now it's kind of expanded. And here's what's really cool. There's different rooms inside of the records. So you can even enter the zone of choice, for example, where your soul chose your specific body to come into. You can go into the zone of possibilities where all the different timelines exist, where we can quantum leap into other timelines. So there's so much that you can do and explore inside of the space of the records. And no, you don't have to be some special fancy smanchy channeler, by the way. Like I said, everyone and anyone has access if they want it.
Right.
And so there's an invitation always on the table for us if we want to lean into that or not.
Okay. Thank you.
That's so super cool. And what about your experience with your angels? Tell me
So
about that, because I was really interested in the book when you talk about being on the other side and the experiencing sleep on the other side in the big puffy bed and things like that.
yeah, so thank you for asking about that. So since that second near death, I feel like I've had such a bond with the angel kingdom. And I know for a lot of people, when we start talking about the angelic presences, they go, "Oh, that's too woo-woo for me." But I actually bring it on even more because these angels have been such a guide for me. So I do have my own spirit team in which there are angels, but I also work with a lot of the archangels too, or archangels, either or. And Archangel Shamuel is very common. Archangel Michael's the one that gave me the vision for the holistic healthcare system, by the way. So these angels come in and they share information with me. I also go and sit with my whole entire council, so my spiritual council, if you will, When I need to make a decision or when I'm struggling with something, we have this beautiful meeting in this beautiful grand hall. And so I've deepened this beautiful relationship with these angels. And my relationships with them, in fact, I would even say some are even better and healthier than the ones I have in this 3D life. But I also recognize that these angels are actually a reflection of me too. And I think we tend to get disconnected. You know, I used to think God was this man in the sky, so disconnected from me, so removed from me. And we oftentimes, even with our spirit team and with the angels, we think they're out so far outside of us. But what if they're not? What if they're aspects of us? Right? And they're just opportunities for us to tune into this multidimensional beauty that we are. And so, even though we talk about the angels being separate from us, they really are extensions of us, just like we're an extension of the divine. And that's what they've taught me over the years, that we are one and the same. And this isn't coming from a place of ego, like, look at me, I'm so angelic. Although I did want to be an angel when I was little. Okay. I did actually want to be
Oh, we
legitimately one.
all.
Yeah, right? Right?
I think I still have the Halloween costume.
Oh yeah, yeah. I got one of me with my little outfit on, my halo and all the things, right? So, I think, this relationship I have with my spirit team has been one of the most powerful things I've done for myself because I understand their aspects of me. It's like I'm building a relationship with myself, but in a different way. And it allows me to get out of my own way because my limited ego mind, my earth generated operating system, that ego, that logical mind, even though it's there to protect me, it also holds me hostage a lot. It tells me all these lies. Oh, you can't do that, or you can't talk about that. People think you're crazy. It's telling me all these things. And so, in allowing myself to have these relationships with these spirit guides, if you will, these angel beings around me, it helps me to get out of that ego thinking. It helps me to get out of my own way because then I know I'm receiving divine advice and not getting confused inside of my head. So, you talked about the book, Janet, and so the Ark, this book, it's based on my near deaths, but they're very different, as you guys know, in the storybook, because as I was writing it, I was writing it as more of an autobiography, to be honest. And then as I'm writing it, Spirit came in and said, "This is the book of the world, it is not yours." And so I surrendered my story to the story of Celeste, the main character. And so even though it is based on my real life and real experiences that I've had, real dreams that I've had, real visions that I've had, I wanted it to come from almost like this fantastical fiction kind of standpoint of, really allowing people's imaginations to be invoked because I know that if we invoke that, they're going to start remembering. They're going to start remembering who they are. So my intention with the book is that as people read it, they would remember who they were and they would also connect more deeply to the angels. And so all the experiences that Celeste has in the arc with the angels and those relationships, those have been an accumulation of my experiences in my dreams and my relationship with the angels since a very young age.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love that.
Yes.
It just felt so like every page I read, it was like I couldn't wait to get to the next page because you would read it, you would absorb it, and then you'd go to the next page. So it wasn't all just like, oh, let me zoom through this book. It
Yeah.
was you absorb every page.
That's just delightful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that was my hope. That was my hope. So thank
And
you.
it was great to read because, I mean, it was so familiar with it. It was just in alignment with so much of our own understanding of how things are. So I think, for somebody that's new to all this, it's a great way to introduce them to the concepts and the experiences, and exactly like you said, make them think and open up things.
Yes, that's my dream for that book. And there are more. So we're working on book 2, guys.
Good.
Good.
Trilogy.
Well,
So yeah, there's
with
more
a cliffhanger. So
right? Yeah, I did leave you with the cliffhanger. I
I was
did.
thinking, oh, she needs a clear in there.
So do you have 4 books that you're writing?
Well, there's 3. This is a trilogy, but I'm not limiting it to that, but that's just what been shown to this point. So what are you telling me, Janet? Do I have another book in there still?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
she
I get
did.
that quite strongly. There's another book, and this one is about this thick,
Oh, wow.
and there's illustrations in it too.
Illustrations. Okay, let's back up. So I'm gonna need to read this book at some point. Are there lots of pictures, or
No.
is it in a
No pictures.
written form?
No
Okay,
pictures,
I'm
so
gonna
it's
actually
all
have to concentrate.
describing. Yeah.
Bill,
It's not
here's the book.
animated.
I
Look
do
at here's
enjoy
the book,
reading.
There it
and
is.
this is how thick it is. It's not very thick, Bill.
You can,
Okay,
See?
yeah, you can pound it out in a few hours for
but I
sure.
have a hard time reading. I fall asleep, unfortunately.
Ah,
Oh
But
no, you won't
yeah.
want to sleep. You won't
what
want to sleep.
what also happens is May and I watch this Rise TV, and they have some very interesting paranormal stuff on there. It's all kind of interesting stuff. Sometimes it puts me to sleep, not because it's boring, because it is not, but I do believe that May figures there's some things maybe I'm not supposed to know, or I
Yeah.
start to deeply concentrate on whatever topic they're speaking about, and it puts me to sleep.
Very interesting. It's like a
So
meditative.
Oh, so just to clarify that, so there's this thing as far as unapproved, how is it? Unapproved information. So it's like we have been programmed through, I won't get into all the details and stuff, but if this truthful information comes out, it shuts us down into sleep because it's unapproved information. So that's what I was trying to explain to Bill. But I think also what happens is he's going into this deep remembering it's bringing stuff up from his subconscious and he's falling asleep, but he's still getting all the information.
Yes.
So
Yes. A lot of my clients will say they fall asleep in my meditations and they don't want to fall asleep because they want to get all the information and have this cognitive conscious experience. And I remind them all the time that they're still getting exactly what they need.
Yes.
Like anything they need to receive in that subconscious, they are getting. Absolutely.
Right.
well, I've been finding in the last year that when I do start to fall asleep, what happens, or if I feel like I'm going to fall asleep, there will be another, I don't even know how to explain it. It's almost like there's a dream going on, but I'm not asleep yet. And I'll
Right.
catch myself thinking, okay, where did that thought come from? Because I wasn't watching it on TV and I
Yeah.
wasn't asleep,
Yes.
but it's like
It dropped in.
being awake and still and dreaming because I'm in that half state.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
Well, I
Noticed it a
can
few
relate
times.
to that. Yeah, I can relate to that. Bill, I think there's a couple things that are coming through intuitively for me around this. And one is that you do some quite a bit of dimension travel. So you'll pop into other timelines, other dimensions and pull information. But you're also very, very clairvoyant. So that's a really special gift that you have. And I don't know if you've let that gift fully become realized yet for yourself, but
No,
I'm
but
going
that
to
is what I
make
mean.
me.
I was experienced things like, you talk about somebody and they call or they walk through
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So when I met Aimée and she explained to me what Reiki was and gave me a few sessions, we started to talk about the intuitive side.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to explore.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well,
what caught my interest. I mean, plus a few things, even, as a child, going back to a child, maybe I was started to be in my teens and starting to understand death a little more and thinking, well, this can't be the end. Like the light switch just can't go off. Like that
right.
doesn't make any sense. I have a conscious mind. How can it just go off and then that's the end of it? What, somebody blew the match out? Doesn't make sense.
I
Yeah.
wonder how many of us think that, because I remember closing my eyes and thinking and trying to stop breathing and going, okay, what's going to happen now? Like,
Right.
this can't be it. This
Yeah.
can't be it.
Definitely is not it. And Bill, you're an oracle, and I'm super excited for you to keep leaning into those intuitive gifts because
Thank you.
you're gonna master that. You're gonna become a very gifted spiritual advisor. Yeah. Yeah, that's strong, showing them
Backing
strong.
up everything Janet told him.
Oh, good. Let me validate that for you. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Love it.
It's good
Love
to
it.
hear from another person though.
Yeah, a lot of what you've said is and talked about is reinforced things that Aimée and Janet have been telling me now for the last
Beautiful.
5 years, and things that I've been experiencing, like even the past life stuff. And I will tell people, because I'm working with Aimée when we're doing
Yeah.
sessions on people or experiences, and I'll tell them, I'll just tell you what comes to mind, and I usually get it at their feet or on their legs, shins. And then it might mean something, it might not. And then we talk about it after. And sometimes it is something maybe in this time that they actually remember.
Yeah.
Right. And then other times it's not. And then it usually gets backed up by,
Mhm.
again, Janet and Aimée. So,
Yeah.
I would say 99% of what you get is past life stuff.
and a lot of it
Yeah.
generally goes way back, like,
Wow.
primitive,
Yeah.
giant, that age.
Well, wow. Love it. Well, the Akashic Records is like such a sweet spot for past lives because we can pull visuals, we can pull feelings, we can connect with past versions of ourselves or with other people we're working on. It's really, really powerful. Yeah, really powerful. And if you can imagine doing Reiki inside of the Akashic Records, that's a whole nother level up
That's
too.
an interesting idea.
Well, I think even when we were doing the past life
Regression work. Yeah.
They-
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, there's some
In,
similarities there. Yeah.
in the Akashic Records.
We have our own little version that we invented.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
really
perfect.
well.
You guys are tuning in already. Just now you can know that you're doing that, right? Yeah, so good.
Well, it's good to connect with, it's so good to connect with you, DeeAnne, and just, having like-minded people or having similar but different experiences and different perceptions, but similar perceptions. I don't know how quite to describe it.
A lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities. And I've been on your website. I've listened to some of your podcasts. I wish I could listen to more, but it's always a time crunch thing for me.
Of course.
Trying to get my own done. But I just wondered if maybe you've talked a little bit about some of the work you do, but maybe now, before we close off, you could just maybe share some of the services you can provide to people, how people can contact you, and I will leave information as well once we get the podcast.
Oh, thank you for asking. I love working with people one-to-one. So I still accept one-to-one clients for sessions, for Akashic record readings, healings, clearings. I do everything through the Akash. So depending whatever is needed for them. But my deep love is to teach. So I teach intuition courses, and then I also teach business courses for spiritual beings because I really found that there was a gap there, in the business world. And so I've been able to blend spirituality with our 3D. And it's beautiful because we get really tangible tools to help us to grow our businesses while still being aligned with our spirit. And that's oftentimes where a lot of us feel a disconnect. I also love giving things away. So there is going to be a link in the show notes for everyone to do the Soul Blueprint quiz, which is a fun little quiz you get to do to find out a little bit more about yourself. And at the end, you get a free session. So if you do the quiz, you're going to get a complimentary session. It will be with either me or someone on my team. I can't guarantee it would be me. I have an entire team of incredible healers and readers, but you will be matched up with somebody, and that is a gift for everyone who's listening if they so choose. And then, of course, you mentioned my podcast, When the Spirit Calls. That's on my website too, rosehope.ca, and all of that will be in the show notes for people. So I want to kind of leave everybody with a couple of thoughts to ponder as we exit out. The first one is this: in every given moment, you have everything you need and then some. When this first came through in spirit, I had resistance to it. I thought, well, no, that person that's starving doesn't have everything they need. But as they explained it to me, they said, well, no, everyone has everything they need. That's their experience. That's what their soul needs. And so there's a deeper layer of that. Yeah. And so as I leaned into that, it's so great for me. It's so potent for me because when I'm struggling, when I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, panic because this isn't working or that's not working, I can simply remind myself I have everything I need and then some. And that really helps me to move through this world. And the second one is this, and it is related to intuition. Your intuition is always right. It's your perception of the outcome that perhaps isn't.
Mhm.
In other words, what I'm saying is your intuition will lead you into all sorts of situations, not just the rainbows and butterflies. And I remember meeting somebody and feeling such a connection with them, and I let my intuition draw me into this relationship, and then it kind of exploded in my face, and I was like, my intuition was so wrong. Like I should have, like, why did I lean in? And Spirit said, no, no, no. You needed to go through that experience, and they needed that experience too.
Mhm.
And so then I started to be able to pull the learning of that. So my perception was that if my intuition was guiding me, it guided me to all the good, wonderful things. But our intuition will also guide us into experiences that will evolve us in different ways, that'll help us to heal in different ways, that'll trigger us in different ways so that we can evolve as human beings. So reminding you to trust your intuition. It knows, it knows,
It knows.
it knows.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, DeeAnne. Bill, Janet, did you have any other questions or comments before we sign off?
It was just a pleasure to talk to you and to hear your story. And I look forward to the rest of your books.
Oh, thank you so much, Janet. You're such a joy. I so appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, DeeAnne, for sharing it. Definitely is going to prompt me to read your book now. I'm quite interested, and yeah, and I mean, I agree with the things you're saying, especially the intuition thing. I look back at my own life when I was younger, and some of the worst moments in my life, um, they build you to who you are, but you learn a lot from those. You know,
Yeah.
even though there was a period of 5 years that wasn't a great time in my life, but I grew to understand more about other people and myself in those situations. Right.
Right.
And though, at the time it's horrible, I lived through that, but after you realize, now I get it. Right. And now I've grown stronger and learned from that. So
It's beautiful, Bill. Why do we always have to learn it after the fact, though? Why can't we, when we're in it, figure it out? It's always after when we're like,
It's all part of that journey. We just didn't read the small fine print when we came in. What? I have to
oh,
experience that? Why?
right? Oh, so
What's
true,
not fun
Aimée.
here?
Thank you so
Oh,
much for having me. It was such a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you.
yes,
well,
thank you.
this will be the start
Thank you.
of a longer relationship, I hope. And it's certainly been a formative and amazing show. And we thank you again, DeeAnne, for being willing to share all of your profound experiences and your beautiful energy.
Oh,
And thanks,
thank you.
Bill and Janet, for you guys being here. And for our listeners, tune in for our next episode about a prophecy, a Doberman prophecy, which is actually tied with Bill. Have
Ooh.
a fabulous rest of your week and health, harmony, and happiness. Good night.
Good night.
Bye bye.
And if you wouldn't mind just staying on, DeeAnne. Okay.